Final Fantasy XI is, in my opinion, one of the best MMORPGs ever made, and part of that is the amazing diversity between its many classes. Over the 15 plus years of its existence, the balance between those classes has changed dramatically, with new ability introductions, bug fixes, and tweaks constantly altering the strengths and weaknesses of each. It's not going to stop me from coming up with my top 5 list of the best jobs in Final Fantasy XI though, across its entire lifespan, level caps, expansions, and all. So hey guys, it's Hunt4Games, and I've been thinking about this list for a long time, probably since I started the game. I've broken the criteria out into 3 different areas of focus to help keep things as simple as possible: soloing ability, partying effectiveness, and strength in missions and endgame content. Now to be clear, this list doesn't necessarily reflect my personal preferences in terms of playstyle. In fact, I almost always pick the underdog jobs, so most of mine probably won't even show up. On top of that, Final Fantasy XI has literally changed so much over the years, it's almost been multiple different games. So obviously this list is ridiculous and shouldn't be taken seriously. Also, Geomancer and Runefencer unfortunately aren't up for consideration because they never existed in the 75 era, and that's just not fair. But let's kick it off anyway with number 5, Warrior. I hate saying this because I really don't like Warrior, but it's just so freaking stable. Pick a time, any time in Final Fantasy XI's history, and Warrior likely was solidly usable. No, it didn't always put out the absolute highest numbers, but with its wide range of high skill tiers, incredible ability and trait set, and frankly, widely diverse set of gear options, it was just solid. When you look at some abilities a job gets and you're like, man, it must be cool to have those standard and not have to sub something else to get them. That's Warrior. It is the source of Provoke, Berserk, Double Attack. That's Warrior's thing. It can sub Sam on top of that, or Ninja, or Dancer, or whatever. It's just such a powerhouse. New gear or weapons get introduced, War can probably take advantage of them. Shift from dual wielding to two-handed weapons with the latest update to Samurai, War's fine. Range attacks get changed, Warrior don't care. Point is, the amount of options at Warrior's disposal, it was just rare to see it take a hit. But let's run through the criteria and see how it's sitting at number 5. So soloing, honestly, it's about as effective as most damage dealing soloers. Can destroy easy stuff fast enough for it not to matter, has sub Samurai, Ninja, or Dancer as an option for self-sustainability, won't be winning any awards for hardest hitting NMs taken down through kiting or ridiculous strategies, but as one of Square Enix's original tank options, it can take a beating. So how about parties? This one's a no-brainer. It was always a solid option. Early game, it could be a fantastic tank option, and otherwise was always a useful DD to have that could skill chain with anyone depending on what weapon it used. So whatever the party needed and survive a few hits if it got the enemy's attention. At 99, I don't see too many warriors anymore, but mostly because other DDs have become more specialized and offer something unique. War's still probably fine at what it does, but that's just it. It's just fine. So missions, and here's where it's number 5. Warrior has always been and always will be just fine. And when it comes to beating the hardest boss you've ever encountered, you want the best of the best. Now, War wasn't hard to fit into party makeup and could take advantage of specific subs whenever they were needed, such as Shadows for damage mitigation or Meditate to get TP without attacking, but it was always just mimicking another job. If you needed quick TP to end a fight quick, you might choose a Dark Knight or a Sam. Kiting an enemy, you'd want something more evasive like Thief or Ninja. Now, I'm not saying Warriors were bad for most stuff, they weren't. They just were never really required. Sometimes you really need a specific role that only 1 or 2 jobs could fill, and it was rarely, if ever, that Warrior was that job. Which brings us to number 4, a job that often was that job, Ninja. Now, ninjas are a tough one, because at 119 and level 99, they've sort of stepped out of the limelight as a tank and are just an okay DD. But it just cannot be ignored that for years they spent hard-earned gil to be one of the most useful jobs in the game, and frankly one of the more unique jobs in MMORPG history, period. Ninja was a decent damage dealer in their own right, offering fantastic utility as well in terms of enfeebles through ninjutsu and even a touch of magic damage. But the real bread and butter was tanking with Utsuzemi, offering shadows that absorbed single target attacks and spells, allowing good ninjas to rotate between the Ni and Ichi versions of the spell and avoid most damage altogether. This was insane, and it changed Final Fantasy XI. Ninja was originally introduced as sort of a DD support role, offering enfeebles and other utilities, and then damage on the side. Instead, it was so brokenly amazing as tank that that's all it did. Ninja would have probably been a preferred subjob for basically everybody if Utsuzemi was the only valuable addition it offered. But on top of that, it also offered the only dual wield in the game for many years, making it essentially required for one-handers such as Thief. It was an astoundingly powerful job as both a main and a sub, but how does it match up to our 3 points? First, we've got soloing, and very few jobs can claim to beat a ninja in this area. Between its evasion, utsuzemi, and mild enfeebles and the addition of subtle blow, it beat out basically every other melee in terms of raw face tanking ability. It was weak to AoEs and special moves that ignored shadows, but most of the enemies that would be firing off anything in that regard would be taking down anyone else basically anyway. Clearly up at the top of the list here. So how about parties? I mean, what can I say here? If Ninja could survive the road to level 37 without Utsuzemi Ni, it was one of the favorites. I mean, one of the best tanks for partying all around. Its only weakness was its lack of hate generation when compared to Paladin. If you could figure out a way around that with like a thief or elemental wheel or something, you were golden. So how about endgame content? Honestly, the 119 era is the only thing bringing Ninja down here. For the same reasons it was amazing at parties, it was useful for missions and endgame. The biggest detractors were that holding hate against some of Final Fantasy XI's toughest enemies could sometimes be life or death in a boss fight, and these were often the enemies that decided they didn't care about your shadows and would AoE the crap out of you until you were just a shadowy husk of your former self. Haha, shadowy. Still, Ninja was a preferred choice for plenty of stuff, and at the very least could always be a decent damage dealing off tank for if and when the shit hits the fan. Taking us to the middle of the pack with number 3, the absolutely absurd Red Mage. Red Mage is the definition of the jack of all trades, master of none, sporting a healthy range of white magic, black magic, and melee ability. However, where Red Mage edges out for flexible support and breaks the master of none role is with its top tier incredibly effective enfeebling and a single spell, Refresh. In the 75 era of Final Fantasy XI, Refresh was often a make or break spell. As one of only 2 methods in the game until Scholar to restore someone's MP, it defined sustainability for mages. With how important MP could be in Final Fantasy XI, this usually meant the difference between an effective party, a successful fight, or a failed evening. So let's rank it. Soloing, it really might be the best, and if it's not the best, it's really close to the best. With access to strong black magic, healing, enfeebling, and physical opportunities, Red Mage could take on basically anything. Whether it was a strategy involving kiting, face tanking, magic damage, end spells with a low damage dagger to avoid feeding TP, Red Mage could do it. Between having access to practically every buffing spell in the game, the previously mentioned ridiculous array of enfeebles, and a decent number of weapon options, it was just absurd. I mean, a Red Mage famously soloed Genbu back when Genbu would often win against a full alliance of 18 people. The only, and I mean only, downside is its speed. Red Mage could outlast almost anything if it tried hard enough, but it wasn't always the fastest to do it. So how about parties? Here too, Red Mage excels. Although often not getting enough credit, its enfeebles, buffs, and random magic bursts would always grease the wheels to keep everything rolling smoothly. Nothing was more drastic a shift than a Red Mage going AFK or just straight up leaving, and if available, I grabbed one every time. At 119, they've lost a little of that oh my god need you edge, but their flexibility still allows them to be incredibly useful for a variety of party setups and situations. So how about for fights? Well, if Warrior is that job that always sort of fits a role but might not always be needed, Red Mage is almost the direct opposite of that. Most fights in the game that require a normal party setup you wouldn't want to attempt without a Red Mage there. Between Refresh extending the party's ability to sustain just a little bit longer, haste, bar spells, and enfeebles locking even some of the hardest enemies into a frustrating period of paralyzed slowness, Red Mages can mean the difference between victory and defeat. This has been true though for almost every update since Red Mage was first given Refresh. And now at 119 that they can learn spells like Frazzle and Distract 3, I think it'll just continue. But how can a job this strong be only number 3, you ask? Well, that's because number 2 is just straight up broken. Bard. Bard isn't fair. It never has been fair. It's next to impossible to make a job that's sole purpose is supporting the rest of the party and balance it well. It has to make up for the fact that it's replacing an entire player and bring its own reasons for being useful on top of that. Bard did this and more with its incredible songs that enhanced accuracy, attack, haste, whatever the party might need, ballads that offered refresh, and lullabies that slept basically everything. If Red Mage was a job that was desired for many activities and required for others, Bard was this times 1,000. Even with Geo now taking the spotlight for many of the reasons Bard was so great for so many years, Bard is still incredibly useful. In fact, when most people say do you want a Bard or Geo, they say probably Geo, but can we have both? So number 1, soloing. I mean, this is honestly Bard's weakest point, as a support job with generally weak offensive ability. Having said that, I've seen Bards do some insane things with Dagger and subbing Ninja. It's just so rare that someone was a Bard and only Bard. But what they lack in solo ability, they make up for so much in their other uses. In parties, Bards were king. If you had a Bard in your party, you had a good night. End of story. Wherever the group was lacking, whether it be in accuracy against a tougher new camp, or MP for the back row, Bards could offer a solution. Already have a Red Mage? Who cares? Take both. Already have a Bard? Get another one. More haste and attack for everyone. Honestly, I've done that, and it's insane. They were just stupid good, and most of the time didn't even know the meaning of seeking a party. They logged in and were just invited. Once merit parties became a thing, they changed the game. By buffing and pulling slept enemies, the fights never had to stop. What was once a maximum of chain 5, maybe 6, became limitless, with chains in the hundreds being commonplace. While I've always prided myself in my ability to imitate Bard's strategy on Thief or Summoner for merit parties, and they were fun, I could never do it quite as well, and definitely not as easily. In missions, endgame fights, dynamics, whatever, you'd never turn down a Bard. For many things, Horde Lullaby wasn't just a great strategy, it was the only strategy. Not only could it sleep enemies even the incredible Red Mage just couldn't, but it was pretty hard to interrupt and resist. And for all the reasons Bard made partying great, it was great for fights as well, just making difficult fights all that much easier. And for any event where speed and time were a factor, Bard was just a must. That's all there is to it. So I'm sure plenty of you are now asking yourself what number 1 could possibly be, and honestly, this was a tough one for me. But throughout the years, one job has shined through in its usefulness, and while changing strategies, job competition, and other factors have changed how it can be used, it has always been highly desired for one thing or another. The number 1 most useful job in Final Fantasy XI? Black Mage. Now many of you just thought about turning off this video, maybe you kicked your computer or monitor, but hear me out. Black Mage is one of the staple jobs of the Final Fantasy series, and maintains that status in 11, offering up some of the strongest instantaneous damage in the game. It also possesses a unique ability to damage countless enemies at once with Aga spells, and then put them to sleep afterwards with the AoE Sleep Go or Sleep Go 2. While weak physically, if protected, it could be one of the most dangerous damage dealers throughout the levels. So let's get to the 3 criteria to see why Black Mage is leading the pack. Well, like Bard, Black Mage is weaker than most in soloing, but still a fairly capable job. Anything that could be slept or bound, in theory, could be killed by a Black Mage given enough time. And with Aga spell, some incredibly tough scenarios could occasionally be beaten alone, like that famous solo of Operation Desert Swarm by that ridiculous Black Mage. That might have been the same guy that was the Red Mage that soloed Genbu. While drawn out fights could be difficult, Black Mage was one of the few jobs that could essentially solo their way to 75 through quickly defeating Beastmaster pets. With pets low HP, Black Mages could often 1 or 2 shot their way to victory, and slowly making their way up through the levels that way was kind of fun. While a few other jobs could attempt this, such as Blue Mage, no one did it better than Black Mage. So how about their partying? Honestly, this was the area that they were closest to losing to Bard or Red Mage. But besides the Treasures of Adargon period, they've really been heavily desired ever since day 1. Between bursting defining many of the early years, magic kills being a necessity in Abyssia, and magic damage and bursting coming back in a huge way at 119, it's just tip top. It suffered heavily in the Merit Party era, and with Calibri popularity basically ruining them, but at that point, many Black Mages were forming Black Mage only parties and doing just as well. Not saying it was easy, but Black Mage parties were incredibly fun and successful, so alternatives were there, even in its darkest hour. But the real kicker here is the missions and fights. There are very few fights in this game where the answer isn't how many Black Mages can we throw at it. I'm not saying they don't exist, but they're not common, and in the fights where that isn't the case, Black Mage is totally still incredibly valuable, just not 15 of them at once. No matter what you say about Bard, 18 Bards are not going to beat Divine Might. Black Mages have been useful for basically every fight and mission since Final Fantasy XI came out. If it was your first job ever, I can't think of a time where you weren't valued, like ever. And with Shantotto, the queen of the Black Mages, having somehow become the embodiment of Final Fantasy XI in other games. Seriously, she's referenced all over the place, and come on, Shantotto hype. It's pretty clear which jobs Square Enix favors. Some honorable mentions that I should throw out there, jobs that I consider for this list but honestly just couldn't make the cut. Paladin. Party game was pretty weak, and some of its endgame viability was held back behind ridiculous gear needs like the Aegis or O-Chain, but otherwise it was an incredibly strong job that was used for most stuff. Now, let's be fair, I've had amazing parties with Paladin, but it relies a lot more on Red Mage than Ninja does. Dark Knight has maintained viability as one of the stronger jobs in the game for almost all of time, but its tendency to kill itself makes it a dangerous pick for a lot of missions, and Adargon hit it hard with Calibri's reflecting back all those absorbed TPs. Otherwise though, it's super intense and deserves a chance at least to fight against Warrior. Sam also almost beat out Warrior on this list, but it just never had the flexibility and was struggling a bit before the Hasso and Saigon update. War never really needed an update like that, and even benefited from that change as well with how flexible it was and started using Great Axe. Screw you, War. Finally, Summoner is super cool and one of my favorite jobs, but one of the weakest party options out there. And there was also a brief time where it was only Carbuncle and Spirits. The other avatars didn't exist for a little bit, and that's just ridiculous. The fact that there was even a moment in time where that was the case, I mean, what was it doing? It was useless. But tell me what you all think. Obviously this list was all in good fun, and one of my favorite aspects of Final Fantasy XI is its flexibility in terms of strategy and party composition. But were any of these on the mark, or did I totally forget a job that deserves a top slot? I enjoyed making this one, so look out for top 5 worst jobs as well. I think that'd be a good one to make. And otherwise, don't forget to check back every Tuesday and Saturday for the latest video, and I'll see you all in the next one. As always, guys, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, you should totally think about subscribing. I've got videos coming out twice a week, and if you like this one, there's at least a chance you'll like some of the others that are very similar to this, so live dangerously. Let me know what you guys thought about the video in the comments and other videos you'd like to see. And finally, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Huntin for Games to keep up with all the latest stuff. See ya.